All right, thanks everyone for joining us. Let's go ahead and get the show rolling here. Sorry, trying to exit out of all my screens that I had opened up here. I'm Tim Bennock with QLI.
And I'm Mark Pugh with Preferred Medical, and we are
Between Two Coasts.
Two Coasts.
Woo! There it was. Do you guys like that?
Yeah. No. Okay. It's worth a shot.
I loved it. Welcome to our inaugural event. As the description says, we're trying to replicate virtually what we've done in person for years. Mark and I met a few months back, and there's amazing folks in our industry putting out great content for all of us to virtually tune into. But really having a catch-up informal discussion with colleagues and that have become friends is something that everyone's missing out on. And so the biggest difference is obviously that we're not in a conference hallway, but we're on a Zoom call. So thanks 2020 for that. Speaking of which, today's theme is routine interruption. And that can be interpreted two different ways. So first, that our routines have been interrupted since COVID-19 have arrived. Everything has changed in our personal and our professional lives, from travel. I know a lot of us are road warriors that are on today, even to how we maintain our relationships. And the other is that we're being interrupted routinely. So every time we think that we've turned a corner and making progress, something else happens to ensure that we're, in a 360 of discomfort. So everyone has been touched by this, including all four of us. Just a reminder quickly that we do want you guys to engage with us today. It's definitely like we're standing on the conference floor, and make sure that the audience participates as much, because we want you guys, obviously, as you would, tap us on the shoulder in person. Please, feel free to chime in on the chat or raise your hand. And if you want to, we may unmute you. We'll vet you first just to make sure that we actually want you to talk, but no, I'm totally kidding. But so yeah, with all that, let's get it started. Mark, go ahead and introduce our two guests.
Yeah, Tim and I are really happy to have Mark Walls of Safety National and Bob Wilson of WorkersCompensation.com with us today. I've known both of them for a lot of years. In fact, but everybody really in our industry knows them because they're up in front in so many different ways. If you're not familiar with Mark, and I'm not going to do justice to his profile, but he started Work Comp Analysis LinkedIn group with about 31,000 members. He started Outfront Ideas with Kimberly, and he's going to share a little bit more detail about how that relationship works. And he oversees Conference Chronicles with Safety National. So you see a lot of stuff that he writes as he goes to different conferences. Bob is president and CEO of WorkersCompensation.com. He's on the national board of Kids Chance. He's published at least 1,000 entries from Bob's Cluttered Desk, and I think a lot of people think that's his actual name. He's our resident, he's our industry's resident comedian too, as you'll discover as we go through this. You may have not had a chance to actually interact with them besides seeing them on the screen or seeing them on the stage. And so our whole thing is try to get you a little bit kind of behind the scenes. My personal experience with them is that both of them are genuinely nice people. Both of them are conversant on a whole bunch of subjects, including inside work comp as well as outside of work comp. They're both very loyal and supportive to others, and they both have an opinion on everything. So let's start with them sharing one thing that may not necessarily be known about them. And I'm going to do my reveal now.
Yeah. I think
we're
appropriately social distanced.
But we're still distancing, right? That's important. Okay.
That bikini mask really wasn't doing much to keep stuff out, and Mark wasn't a real big fan of it either. So, Mark, why don't you get us started off and kind of let everybody know one thing that maybe people don't know about you?
Well, let's think of one thing people may not know about me. Well, a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned Kimberly, George, and I doing the Outfront Ideas together. And so a couple of weeks ago, we did our first virtual conference. And we had a little technical difficulty on the first day, which necessitated both of us broadcasting from a single camera instead of being in different rooms. And on the feedback we received, one of our attendees took notice of that. And they said that they found it incomprehensible that Mark and Kimberly sat at the same computer station for the duration of the day without practicing social distancing or wearing masks. They even pointed out that if we were in Illinois, we were likely breaking the law. So the thing that clearly people don't know about me is that Kimberly George and I are married. Why, yes, our publicist even put out a press release on it when it happened a couple years ago. So thank you, Karen, for your concern. However, we are quite often in close proximity with each other.
But I can point out that in Illinois, you're still probably violating the law, really.
Yeah. Like,
Oh man.
Well, thanks, Mark, for the 3 people in the industry that didn't know it, including that single Karen. It's good to go and make sure the news is out there. Bob, what's one thing that maybe people don't know or understand about you?
That's really tough because as you know, I talk about just about anything and will give my opinion on just about anything. And in some ways I'm an open book. I had to think about that a little bit. You know, a lot of us, you and I, Mark, especially Mark Pugh, spend a lot of time talking about injured workers and their situation and the conditions, the struggles that they have. And while we have sympathy with that, it's very tough to have empathy with that because we've not been in that situation. We've not been in their shoes. But what people don't necessarily know about me, and it's not relating, I'm not trying to relate this to an injured worker, is as a kid, I had 2 broken legs. I broke my leg twice. I broke my femur when I was 8 years old, and it was a really bad break. It was shattered from the down above the knee. My leg actually, when I fell, I didn't know it at the time. I was laying on the ground, went halfway to my knee, and then took a 90-degree turn to the left and went straight out. It was pretty obvious to everyone around me that my leg was broken. Bone didn't come through. It wasn't a compound fracture. And I ended up in traction in the hospital for about 2 months on that. And then in a body cast, a half body cast from my chest down on both legs to stabilize for another 2.5 months. So I was laid up for almost 5 months in bed. And I don't remember much about the pain of the break. I do remember them setting the leg. But honestly, what I take away from that, or what I remember the most, is my first steps after being laid up for 5 months and how incredibly painful that was. It's the most searing pain I've ever felt, and I try and use that sometimes when I talk about injured workers and what they're dealing with and the challenges. I can go back to that type of moment in time, and I don't talk about that much. In fact, I don't think I've ever. Has any of you ever heard that story? I don't think you've ever heard that story.
It's an exclusive. Exclusive to Between Two Coasts.
Extremely painful. And the other thing I learned, because my leg, when I finally got out and about, my broken leg was about 4.5 inches shorter than my non-broken leg. And I had to wear a very large lift on my left foot. When you're 8 years old, you discover kids are really mean when you appear different and when you have an issue. Now, over the next year, my leg actually caught up and was almost caught up when I fell and broke my right leg ice skating. But that was a pretty standard break. Broke my tibia. That was pretty routine. But even to this day, my left leg is still a little shorter than my right, and I wear a lift inside my shoe to balance out my gait. But I sometimes draw back to that experience of recovering from that. And like I say, it wasn't the break that I remember. It was the pain of that recovery that was just seared in my head, even to this day, 50 years later. So that's what no one knows about me. So there you go. Don't tell them.
And sometimes that first searing pain could stop you potentially from doing what's necessary to recover, right? If the pain is so intense, I don't want that.
I remember it so well. My mother was holding me the first time I got up. She had to walk me through some of the therapy. They didn't send us to therapists as much in those days in 1968. But I remember my mother telling me we had to go through it and we had to do it. And I just, remember it. It's actually coming back now. I think I'm going to cry. So let's end this.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. No, that's but yeah, I think it's a defining moment. I try and go back to that periodically when I need to.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
No, now that I brought everybody down, let's talk about Mark being now. Mark and Kimberly, who have Out Front Ideas with Kimberly and Mark, are married. So we have Between Two Coasts with Tim and Mark. Now, are you guys trying to tell us something, or is there some news coming here? Not that there's anything wrong with it. Are you guys married or something?
We're still in the courting period. Like it's early on still. We're still trying to figure out what this is.
Well, I'm looking at his beard trying to figure out what that is. I mean, there's no doubt. What the hell?
Hey, it's snacks for later on.
Oh, ouch.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for sharing that. We truly appreciate that. And in the spirit of the kind of open-ended conversation, I want to get things started with an opening question and see where we go. So Bob, what is the biggest thing that you miss from pre-COVID days? And if you wouldn't mind, share one thing from a professional standpoint and one thing from a personal standpoint.
Well, from a professional standpoint, I mean, as much as travel can be a pain, you have a family on the road. We all joke about our on the road family and friendships that we have developed. And you guys are among that group of people that you enjoy seeing, you enjoy visiting with, you enjoy the camaraderie and catching up. And I really miss that. I really do miss that. And from a professional perspective, I include it as a professional perspective because that's my business. I mean, it's part of my business and in those travels. From a personal perspective, I just miss what everyone would define as a sense of normalcy. You just want you want life to be normal in the morning. You don't want to get up and worry about if you have to wear a mask or what you have to do, or did I sanitize my hands when I'm done at the Taco Bell drive-through, where, by the way, they make me dig around in some tray to get my change that 600 other people have dug around in. We're not protecting anybody. But I think I just want that. I miss the sense of normalcy. I think all of us after 2020 just want to go back to some sense that we can call normal.
Absolutely. And you made a good point there of like the road family, right? And it's interesting. I mean, that's the whole reason Mark and I really wanted to launch this is I do feel like I'm missing out on like, even seeing you guys on stage, right? I think all of us enjoy seeing our colleagues be successful across the industry and presenting on topics that can truly impact the outcomes of injured workers, right? And so in a virtual environment, it's fantastic and everyone is still able to tap into that. But I feel like just the in-person idea generation or meeting somebody prior to your presentation at the coffee shop and really kind of spitballing what that presentation looks like new ideas come from that, which then better the overall success of the conference or the presentation wherever we're at. So I do like the fact that you said that it is like a road family, because I do feel like, and I'm definitely newer to the industry. And so I've been lucky enough to meet up and hang out with you guys in the industry. And at first I won't lie, getting into workers' compensation, there's like this, it can't be that exciting, right? There's these preconceived notions of everyone like, it's not that exciting. But once you start meeting the people that really make this industry tick, like everyone's awesome. I mean, that's really what matters. And that's what we all miss. And I'm to the sense of normalcy. I think that I'm also ready for that. I don't know when that time comes, but I definitely, from my personal perspective, miss that as well. So Mark, you want to chime in on kind of the same?
Well, yeah, you stole my thunder in terms of what I'm missing, because what I'm missing is this. I learned a lot, going out. I was on the road 80% of the time, and I would learn a lot in just casual conversations with people. What's going on with them? What's going on at their company? What types of things they're concerned about in the industry? So there's a lot of knowledge to be gained from those casual conversations, and I do miss that. From a personal standpoint, I gotta say, I don't miss all the travel. I've been working from home through this. My wife, Kimberly George, is also working from home through this. She's a very good cook. I've put on probably the COVID-19, and so that's not been so bad. As a matter of fact, it'll be interesting when it's time to go back and start traveling again, because I've kind of gotten used to eating reasonable meals and sleeping in my bed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, some conversations I've had, I'm pretty confident that there are some CEOs and CFOs around the country that are really getting used to $0 in their travel budget. What do you think? CEO of workers' compensation.
We're saving a ton of money. I mean, we really are. We're having a great year.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there going to be a return to that? Because I think the assumption when COVID happened is like, okay, this happened and then we're going to kind of get back to normal and back to how it was. And I think the more we look, the ripple effects from all this stuff, just amazing stuff that I can't wrap my head around all the time. Are we ever going to go back to, Mark eating, first class in United, or, Bob getting the number 2 seat on Southwest Air? Are we ever going to, number one, I'm sorry, Are we ever going to get back to that?
You know,
Go ahead, Mark.
it's going to be interesting to see because, as you said, Mark, you know, we've shown that business can get done without all of that happening. We had one of our sessions a couple weeks ago was a broker panel. One of the broker panels said, "I'm having meetings with my clients with markets all over the world. We're having more meetings than we could have ever had before where we're trying to travel."
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we've shown as an industry that business can get done without all of this travel, that we can be more efficient. So I do wonder to what extent, my expectation is you're going to see a lot of companies stepping back and in 2021, while budgets are still tight, really looking at this and saying, do we really need to make that trip? Or can this be a Zoom call?
Yeah.
Do I need to send, you know, 10 people out for this RFP, or is that a Zoom call, or you send one person, or what? Again, we've shown business can happen without all this extra expense. So I do wonder.
I think I think there's a valid point to that. I mean, the technology has really, this could not have happened like it has 10 years ago. It would have been much more of a disaster. You know, for my company, we were closed the office for 10 weeks. The going virtual was seamless. I was stunned. A lot of conversation about, do we want to become a virtual company? Believe me, all my employees would like to work at home now. They loved it. And we got a lot done. We had Zoom calls every morning. We'd start with a Zoom call. It worked out very well. From a conference perspective, I think conferences the next couple of years are going to struggle because of exactly what Mark pointed out, that people are going to be reluctant. We realize we can do a lot of this. The people who have the friendships on the road would like to go out and meet the people and see the people they know, but the people who are paying the bill and calling the shot may not feel the same way.
Yep.
But what I think will happen, I was having a conversation with someone in my company recently, and we were talking about all the money we're saving, and the question was, well, do you need to do all this travel? And I made the point that when my competition is back out traveling, yeah, we need to be back out traveling. So when your competition starts showing up at conferences, guess what you're going to need to do? So I think it'll be slow, but I think it will build back. I hear a lot of people say that, oh, we'll never go back to normal. I think that's bull. I think we will actually return to a great degree what we defined as normal prior. And I think that there will be people going to conferences. You will go back, but it's not going to be the V-shaped recovery we hear about on the rest of the economy. It's going to be a much slower process as I think people get accustomed to going back out and then feel that it's necessary to go back out. Because, I mean, why do some of us go to conferences? Some of you go because you know your competitors are there and your clients are there. The big thing is, will the clients show up? You know, the vendors are going to show.
Yep.
But will the employers and the insurance companies, you know, those people who are clients, are they all going to be there? It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
You know, Bob, I want to add to what you just said, because I really think, you know, coming into this, I think there was a very much a need for big conferences in particular to reinvent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know at late, November of last year, Mark Pugh and I were in an empty expo hall at booths next to each other, you know, asking, why are we here? And why are we spending this money to be here when no one really comes to visit us? And when you talk to people about, you know, what do they miss? They'll say, I miss people. You don't hear anybody say, oh, I miss going to the expo hall.
Well, let me push pause on that real quick. We did have Tom Glasson say that he does miss cruising the exhibit hall so that he can stock up on pens and pads.
I'm actually, I've made a note to, I'm actually going to Texas. One of the few functions I get to do, Kids Chance of Texas having a golf tournament, support Kids Chance of Texas in the golf tournament.
Right.
That I'm going to be going out to speak at, and I'm going to bring Tom some pens. I made a note, I saw that.
You know, the other thing you don't hear people saying is, I miss conferences because I miss the educational content, because I think the industry has shown the ability to produce great online educational conference. I see people in the audience commented on some virtual conferences they've been to.
Yep.
I've attended several. You know, Bob, you and I both produced online events.
Yep.
The educational content is as good as you're going to get at any in-person conference. And so it comes down to you miss people. So from a budget standpoint, from that purely budget standpoint, what's the price tag you're willing to spend for that? You know, what's the value of networking alone? Because we've shown we can get the education without the in-person.
Right.
Went to the expo hall. So what's that value of the networking? And I don't know. It's hard to
Well,
say.
and to even expand on that a little bit, we hosted the SACA virtual, the Southern Association of Workers' Compensation Administrators, their virtual conference this summer. And they actually had more people in attendance virtually than they had physically, because people who have been unable to get travel approval and have not been able to put it in their budget to travel to some of these conferences can spend $50 to log into a virtual conference or see a free virtual conference. So we do have the potential actually to expand a lot of this to a greater audience than sometimes, you know, I feel like sometimes we fly around the country and we all talk to ourselves, you know, we're the same people talking to each other in different cities around the country. And now we actually have the opportunity to introduce ideas and concepts to a much broader audience on a virtual perspective or platform.
You know, and one of our guests just commented on this factor around public entities and public sectors.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about budget constraints, that's a group that's going to be severely impacted by budget constraints.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be surprised if I see any public entity people traveling to industry conferences this year. I don't think they're going to have the budget. The same thing goes with regulators. I'm going to be amazed if they're traveling to industry conferences in 2021 because of the reality of the fiscal constraints they're going to be under.
So not even, and we touched on this a little bit in a past conversation, but remove the fiscal constraints. And what about just the perception of being the first, right? So Bob, you talked about you're going to be traveling when your competitors are traveling, right? So I really think that you're going to see this kind of trickle effect of conferences being the first conference to host an in-person event. Well, you may have a conference that pulls the trigger and hosts it, but are you going to have, you know, employers sending people to that first conference? Like, what do you guys think that delay is going to be? Or do you think that there will be a delay in people?
You know, the first big industry one on my radar is RIMS. You know, I haven't seen what WCRI is going to do yet, but I'll be amazed if they don't go virtual. You know, other events in first quarter for me have already gone virtual. So the first big event out the door for me that is talking about perhaps in person is RIMS. But RIMS is already preparing to go with a bifurcated model. They're telling people ahead of time that we're going to have virtual available and we're going to have in person, and we may pivot to an all virtual depending on what's happening. You know, Tim, as you point out, there's a lot of risk in being the first ones out the gate, and especially in the risk management industry, it would be very bad optics to have a risk management conference have an outbreak of COVID.
I can tell you, you know, in selling to the workers' comp industry, it's interesting because it's very risk averse. Nobody wants to be first in anything. It seems like they want it to be tried and true and tested. And first, I'll clarify: we have no competition. But anyway, I would say, you know, really no competition. But I think that is right. I think no one really wants to be first, so it will take a while to go. I do want to pick up on a comment made by Vince Capaldi, which is brilliant. He suggests the first giveaway at an in-person conference be toilet paper, but the question is, do you put your own logo or your competitor's logo on that toilet paper? I think that's brilliant. I'm not going to draw you a picture or draw that out anymore. I'm going to let it just simmer there. I think that was a brilliant statement. And I want to ask Peter Strauss what they're having for lunch on his front porch. He's having a business meeting on his front porch, but I notice he's making the colleague buy. So very smart. Good thinking. Good thinking.
Peter's a smart dude. Yeah.
He's not as dumb as we look. I'm telling you, he's not.
Let's kind of switch gears a little bit into the personal aspect of it, because I think there are a lot of business owners that were absolutely not convinced that people could work from home, that would not be as productive from home. They'd be, Bob was one of them. They would be doing errands and, you know, fitting in work around their schedule. And our experience preferred in other places, the productivity has actually at least been as good or even better. And it's kind of exceeded our expectations. So the work from home kind of thing is there, but then you've got the isolation concept where people don't get the interaction. We've been talking about the value of networking, but, you know, there's a value of seeing someone other than my wife, you know, for 6 months on end. So how do we help people that are working from home that may not be used to it, may have considerations or issues with depression, anxiety, isolation, mental health issues? How do we deal with that from an employer standpoint and trying to make sure that our workforce doesn't go south on us until we hit that, whatever that new normal is?
Well, I think I'll step in on that, and I feel a little hypocritical talking about I'm worried about people doing other things at home, because I am actually at home today in my new house with a plumber and an electrician downstairs doing work, and that's what I'm trying to take care of while I'm here. So never mind. I think I was one of those guys who never thought I'd want a virtual company, that we just couldn't be as productive, and I will be the first to tell you I was shocked at how easy it was to go virtual for us. But one of the things we did that I think really helped is a daily Zoom call. Everybody in on the call, everybody talking about what they're working on, where they need to go, what needs to be done. Improved, probably had better communications during that 10-week period than we do when we're all sitting in the same building, or most of us. I have some virtual employees at Texas and North Carolina. But we had better communication during that period. And I think it really helped. I have an attorney friend out of Orlando who actually mentioned that he had to have Zoom happy hours with his paralegals because they were going nuts at home. This is at the height of the lockdown. We're Florida, we're free, okay? We're out and about, baby. But I mean, but when we were locked down 10 weeks, 12 weeks, they were going nuts with not being able to get out. And he was working just to try and keep them in a cohesive form. But I really think you need that communication, and Zoom for us was a terrific tool to be able to do that on a daily basis. It really was important.
Mm-hmm.
I think our entire industry has shown that they can get the job done working from home. The question is, what's the long-term negative impact? I think one thing unquestionably you lose is that collaboration. When I was handling claims, I don't think there was a day that I didn't go to the office next to me and say, hey, I've got this situation. What do you think? Have you seen this? And you just don't have that day-to-day collaboration between colleagues in this work from home environment. That's lacking, and that's eventually going to have an adverse impact on companies. I do have a lot of concern about the social isolation as well. I mean, that is a real thing. And from thinking about the wellness of our staffs and the people that we work with, that has a very big impact on overall mental health, is social isolation. And for a lot of people, they're working from home. They may go to the grocery stores. This is a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's been some really good comments in the chat.
There have been great comments in the chat. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And one of the comments was about that not all virtual conferences are created equal. Some of them have delivered good quality, and some of them were a complete waste of time. What's going to be maybe the defining factor in going forward, assuming that, at least during the first quarter, probably everything's going to be virtual? What to you guys separates a good virtual conference, one that is worthwhile? And y'all have both done some, so I'm sure you, and I've attended both of yours, and you both do a great job. But what's the difference between a good one and one you go, eh?
I mean, to me, it's a couple things. First of all, it's original content. As we traveled around the country, we would see the same sessions repeated over and over again at conferences around the country.
Yep.
That's not going to fly with a virtual conference that people can attend from all over. They're going to know that was done at, 4 other things. So original content. The other thing to me is that the content is very much focused on education and provides people with value. Again, you think back to some of the things that we were seeing at other conferences were sessions that were either blatantly or not so much sales pitches. And people would walk out of those sessions just annoyed. And if that's what your virtual conference is going to be, is trying to sell your products, people are going to see through that really quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the other thing I'm noticing is that price and quality are not related when it comes to the virtual environment. There have been some excellent free virtual conferences. There have been some very low cost conferences. And then there have been some that were significant cost, almost as if you were still attending. And it almost leaves you with the feeling that they may be producing a conference because, well, we were supposed to have a conference, so we've got to produce a conference.
Yep.
I think to Mark's point, it has to be pertinent. It has to be educational. Obviously, in the era of COVID, it had to have a lot of relevance as to what people are dealing with, had to be timely. But I would agree with that. I think just producing it for the sake of producing it is one thing, making sure that it's timely, unique content that applies across the country, because we are drawing in different people and more people than you would have in a physical environment. So I think that makes sense.
And another issue that goes with that is the people that traditionally produce the in-person conferences, they're really struggling to come up with a way to monetize this virtual model. You know, people aren't willing to spend the same for a virtual conference than they would be something in person. There's a lot of, as you said, Bob, there's a lot of it that's free.
Yep.
And, you know, it's funny, we got an email from RIMS yesterday on this, as they're kind of polling people about, do you think you'll be able to travel? And one of their questions was, how much would you be willing to pay to attend a virtual event?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, trying to figure out what that price point is. And it's really tough from that perspective, trying to figure out how to monetize it. I will tell you that a virtual expo hall is a waste of time. You know, if you think nobody goes into a regular expo hall, nobody's going to a virtual one where they can't get pens and notepads. So
I agree.
That's a big struggle for the industry.
Yeah, I agree.
So sponsors, if you're not charging money for it, sponsors really become important in order to do that. What's the value to a sponsor that applies their name? And let's set aside maybe the virtual expo hall and kind of focus on, I was talking with one conference and they were going to have like this ticker that went across the screen the entire day, and your brand would kind of go over there, and the more you spent, the more it lasted in front of your screen. So people are trying to get creative and giving value to sponsors that are basically going to fund these free conferences. What's the value to sponsor in order to plop down $1,500 to be a part of a virtual conference?
Well, I think you're still getting your name out in front of people. You're still getting your brand and your logo out in front of people. You are seen as supporting the educational efforts and supporting the broader community. I think that's important. But I'd also point out that the costs of doing a virtual conference are nothing compared to the cost of a physical conference. There's no meeting space. There are no meals to worry about. There's no hotel expenses. There's no travel reimbursement for speakers coming in. I mean, the costs are significantly lower. So I think everything there, you're still getting the opportunity as a sponsor to get your logo and your name out. I absolutely agree about the virtual exhibit halls. I've been to some of the virtual exhibit halls, and I actually logged in going, who would want to go here? Why would I want to do this? You don't. I really think that it is, there's still value for a sponsor, but it's in brand recognition. Logo recognition is where you're going to get that opportunity. I will point out, Tom Glasson pointed out that virtual conferences amplify the effectiveness of good speakers and draw attention to the poor delivery of bad speakers. I think I found the guy who was heckling me when I spoke at the Washington Self-Insurance Association recently. So I thank you. I think I now have identified him.
Bob,
no, I think it is a different environment, totally different.
Yeah, but you touched on something. I think you, because I agree with you. I think brand recognition and having your logo out there and your name out there is extremely important. But one thing that I think people are going to struggle with is you even talked about a virtual conference hall and things like that. People aren't going to that. So as a sponsor, you throw $1,500 at something. You have a logo on there. That's enough, or does there need to be some interaction with you as a sponsor with the attendees, right?
Well, and not to interrupt you, Tim, but I think you're spending $1,500. That's significantly less than a $25,000 or $26,000 national conference package.
Yeah.
My logo may still appear on your registration page, or should appear on your registration page. It should be mentioned in confirmation emails that go out. You know, it should be on the waiting page, perhaps when you're waiting to log into that, depending on the webinar system. You're not just getting that splash or the guy-in thing going, I'd like to thank Safety National for sponsoring this today. Yeah. And by the way, Safety National does sponsor the Hot Seat webinar, and we really do appreciate it. We'd like to give them that logo splash. So I'm going to tell you there's a ton of value in sponsoring webinars.
Yeah.
Boy, at least I'm consistent. Imagine if I sat here and go, there's no reason to do that. That's ridiculous.
You know, there is value in branding. I mean, I coordinate our conference sponsorships and also all of our advertising. So we advertise in magazines to have your brand out there, to have your logo out there. And we sponsor conferences for the same reason. But it's just worth dramatically less than an in-person conference, because with an in-person conference, a lot of what we're getting with that conference sponsorship is multiple attendee registrations to go have this face-to-face interaction. So
Right.
take away that. I don't know how you can replace that with a virtual conference. I've literally seen them, have the virtual expo halls and try to encourage people to go to attend and all of that, and it just doesn't work.
No, but it should be, everything should be relative in that. The cost of sponsoring an event like something like this should reflect the fact that you're not getting that face-to-face time with some of those leads. And I think it does. In most situations, it does. If it doesn't, there's a problem with the model of the people producing the webinar.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the challenge right now, just the need to rethink the model. You've got these events have been doing the same thing for years, and now they're really challenged to come up with a new formula that provides value to both their sponsors and the attendees.
Yep.
Yeah, it's conferences have been kind of the Pavlovian response in workers' comp since I've been here. It's you go and you hope for a return on investment, and you spend the money, et cetera. And I think this has been a big reset. And I think we all have to reset our expectations. I think the conference providers have to reset their expectations. Attendees have to reset, and maybe the attendees are even more. One of the things we've had is really good chat on here in Zoom, and one of them talked about chat as a part of virtual conference is really important, and I think that's a great way to communicate back and forth.
Yeah, I agree. I like that feature. I've been to conferences where they have a virtual networking room where you can go meet people face to face for a short chat. I like that feature as well. So there's things you can do on these virtual platforms that make them more engaging and more interactive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the attendee participation, I think, is a big part of the success of what future virtual platforms look like, because you can't just be a passive attendee sitting in a conference hall and then you leave and you go back to your hotel and then you go explore the city a little bit and then you come back and you go to your session with Mark Pugh because he's so entertaining the last time you saw him, and then you go do your thing and then you get invited to a happy hour, right? So there has to be just more engagement or more participation. And maybe expectations need to be a little bit different from both sides for these to keep being successful.
All true, but I have had some in-person presentations where people felt that it was an interactive opportunity to communicate with me while I was on the stage.
Don't ever ask for questions, Bob. You should.
I did ask for questions. They're almost all. I got in trouble for writing about it because they're almost always plaintiff attorneys. Always. Something
never give up the microphone.
Law School 101 that talks about forgetting everything your mother taught you in social etiquette and start shouting out your opinions from the room.
Yeah, never give up the microphone when you're a speaker, because somebody else is going to give a speech.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that does bring up the one of the beauties of virtual conferences. You can mute people very quickly.
I thought we talked about muting Bob halfway through this. We never did that. I know we all kind of Mark and I.
Vote, actually. I was kind of offended because it was unanimous.
Well, we have gone past the anticipated 30 minutes, and actually this worked out exactly how we anticipated. We just threw one question out there, and then Mark and Bob kind of ran with it, and we went all covered all sorts of stuff. Be sensitive to people's time, since we really only advertised this 30 minutes. Either one of y'all have kind of a final word for what based on what we've talked about, or something we haven't talked about you want to leave people with?
Life is going to be normal again. We're going to be fine. It's just going to take a little while to adjust, but things will get back to normal again. This is not the end of the world, folks. We're going to be okay.
I'd say take care of yourself. Take your PTO. Be mindful of yourself, and no one cares about you like you do. So make sure you're taking care of yourself.
That, and I found out Mark and Kimberly are married. Who knew?
Exclusive.
Well, we hope you join us the next time. We do plan on making this a monthly little gathering, little informal discussion. We do have our guests lined up for next month. Mark, do you want to announce who those will be?
Yeah, save the date for November 12th. It is the second Thursday of each month. And so that would be November 12th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time again. And next time it's going to be Becky Curtis with Take Courage Coaching and Dr. Geraldine Datz, who's a behavioral psychologist out in Mississippi. Both are just wonderful ladies that I've gotten to know well, and obviously a lot of in sync as to what they're going to talk about. And they may actually be attending this particular session. So
And they're much better looking than the guests you had
I'm
this
glad
time.
you said it. I wasn't going to say it, so I'm glad you did.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm known as the, chauvinist, misogynist, whatever. So I can say it and get away with it.
And I'm definitely not wearing my bikini mask next time, because the 5 minutes of that was more than enough time for me and for everybody that had to see it. So,
Well, being at a healthcare facility, I'm used to it. It didn't bother me. I thought we were going to keep it on the whole time, actually, but apparently not.
well, you're the only one who knew how to actually wear it properly. All of us had it up and around our nose and not covering our hair and all that stuff. So,
Oh, man.
thanks, Mark. Thanks, Bob. Thanks so much for
Guys,
being part of
Thank
this.
you. Enjoyed it. It was great.
So,
Thanks, Tim. We'll see you next time.
Definitely. Take care, guys.
All right. Bye-bye. This is where he turns us off, right?
Setting the bar pretty low.